Francisco de Quito, the capital of Ecuador, sits at over 9,000 feet above sea level. Quito's volcanic peaks straddle the equator, the invisible line around the center of the earth after which this South American country was named. Located high in the Andes, on the bulge of the equatorial line, Quito is the closest national capital to the sun. Fitting for a place at the intersection of two hemispheres, there is symmetry everywhere you look. As a meeting point between two equal halves, Quito is all about balance. Just like the Earth, it's intersected by an imaginary line, separating the UNESCO-protected Old Town from the trendy New Town, mirroring the past with the present. To see both halves at once, take the gondola up the Pichincha volcano. On these slopes, a historic battle took place that resulted in Quito's liberation from Spain in 1822. Declaring victory was independence leader Antonio José de Sucre, whose statue stands far below in front of the Santo Domingo Church. In the Metropolitan Cathedral, facing Independence Square, you can visit Sucre's tomb. Despite being one of the oldest cathedrals in South America, the lofty building still impresses anyone who enters its cool interior. Many artworks incorporate local interpretations of the Bible, such as the guinea pig served for the Last Supper. The cathedral's blend of indigenous, European, and Arabic styles became known as the Quito School of Art. And this style can also be found in the nearby Basilica de la Merced, which, among other historic treasures, has an impressive cloister library. Back on the Plaza de la Independencia, a soaring monument shows the national emblem, the condor, symbolically breaking the chains of oppression from Spain, the lion. This generous public space is also known as the Plaza Grande, and, as the civic heart of the city, houses the Municipal Palace and the Presidential Palace. In between stands the former Archbishop's Palace, now a cultural center and restaurant. Take a seat on a patio balcony to sample authentic Ecuadorian food, such as a hearty potato soup and deep-fried plantains with cheese. After lunch, take a taxi to Chimbia Park, on a hill just to the east. Its contemporary cultural center is wonderful, but the main attraction here is the view. Below, the Basilica of the National Vow offers a peaceful haven to everyone who steps inside. The sunlight filters in through the stained glass windows, creating an ethereal space. Walk across the cathedral's spine at roof level to climb its highest tower for unforgettable views of Panecillo Hill and its winged statue of Mary. The artwork was inspired by Quito's Madonna, a precious statue kept safe in the church on the Plaza de San Francisco. This square was an important marketplace in pre-Inca times, and in its underground passageways, you can still buy local artifacts. To lure the sun-worshipping locals to their churches, the Spanish depicted sun motifs on the ceilings, as is clearly visible in the Church of the Society of Jesus just to the south. With its dazzling interior and volcanic stone facade, this truly is one of the continent's finest. A good place to end your tour of the Old Town is the nearby ancient thoroughfare, Calle La Ronda. Transport yourself back to the 21st century in Quito's New Town, known locally as La Mariscal. The area around Plaza del Quinde is an energetic jumble of colors and styles, and so is the nearby craft market. Nearby, the bohemian Guapulo neighborhood clings to the mountain slopes, providing a glimpse of what lies beyond. Just to the north, in the valley of Lulumbamba, you can stand in two hemispheres at the same time. The carved stone heads leading up to the Mitad del Mundo monument represent the French scientists who, almost 3 centuries ago, declared this to be the equator. Modern technology shows this is not the case, but it's still a popular attraction. The Intiñan Solar Museum, less than 800 feet away, lays claim to be on the real equatorial line. The entertaining experiments aim to show a change in the pull of gravity, although in reality, the effect is too minute to observe with a naked eye. The shrunken head on display here, however, is anything but a trick. It's a war relic of the tribal Shuar people. Many of Ecuador's surviving indigenous people still live off the land. This rural region may be poor, but its volcanic landscape is extremely fertile and rich in biodiversity. A prime example is the Pululawa Geobotanical Reserve, one of South America's first national parks and one of the largest volcanic craters in the world. Pululawa is Quechua for cloud of water, and the caldera is often shrouded in mist. Of similar mystical appeal is the Maquipucuna Cloud Forest Reserve, a lush paradise for hummingbirds. Some of these tiny birds have adapted to the high-altitude prairie of the nearby Cotopaxi National Park, finding nectar on the cliffs of its highly active volcano. Despite volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, and power struggles, Quito has always recovered its equilibrium and today continues to shine. In order to create harmony, we don't always have to choose between tradition and progress or spirituality and science. Come take a journey to the middle of the world and find wonder and wisdom in Quito.
Our railway adventure begins in the colourful port city of Guayaquil. Located on the Pacific coast, it's home to more than 2 million people. One of the city's few historic buildings is the cathedral. There are quite a few iguanas here. They're free to roam around and they multiply prodigiously.
I like to feed them. 10 years ago, I brought my iguana, Marco Antonio, here. I can still recognize him by his colors.
Our journey will begin in a few minutes. The train is waiting in Duran, a suburb of Guayaquil. Train manager Karen Escobar is here to welcome us. A ticket costs the equivalent of 17 euros. Sales are still a bit bureaucratic. This line only resumed service in 2013. Rail travel in Ecuador is experiencing a renaissance right now. The railway was completed more than 100 years ago when Eloy Alfaro was president. It made him a national hero.
Back
then, the only way to get from Guayaquil to Quito was by horse, and it took a month. We urgently needed a better connection between the coast and the highlands. And the route was so dangerous that travelers used to make a will, because they didn't know if they'd be coming back alive.
The journey is still an adventure. A few security guards on mopeds have joined us. There are no railway gates on the roads, so the guards will secure the crossings for us. When the railway was completed in 1908, it became a symbol of national unity. Today, its reconstruction serves the same purpose. The project has become known as a patriotic challenge that aims to unite Ecuador's various ethnic groups. The Trans-Ecuadorian Railway is 450 kilometers long and runs from the Pacific coast eastward into the Andean highlands. It's widely seen as South America's most spectacular railway line. But Ecuador's lifeline was blocked for 15 years. 250 kilometers of track were affected by landslides and general neglect.
We're very proud of the reconstruction effort. It takes us back to the days of President Eloy Alfaro. Rail travel used to be normal here. When older people board the train now, it's a touching experience for them. They have tears in their eyes. They remember when they and their children used to travel from the coast to the highlands.
The railway has even inspired a popular love song.
La canción que interpretamos primero se llama Rumbo al Sur.
It's called Rumbo al Sur. It was written by Vicente Reyes Palma and originally sung by Juan Álava. It's a very popular song, and it's about the railway that runs between Guayaquil and Quito.
Antes el tren funcionaba Guayaquil, Quito.
Así me tardé yo en volver. El día que vuelva por aquí, si voy para otras tierras, también te llevaré.
El tren.
In the early 20th century, Ecuador was an economically underdeveloped country. But the rail line changed all that, bringing crops from the fields to market. Nowadays, for instance, Ecuador is the world's largest exporter of bananas. The fruit is still harvested by hand. Then the bananas are transported by cable car. These bunches of bananas are heavy, and it's hard work to haul them around. The teams earn the legal minimal monthly wage, which is equivalent to about 220 euros. This is the plantation's logistics centre. Here, the bananas are separated from the stalks and then sorted according to varying export standards. Ecuador's climate is ideal for growing bananas all year round. The bananas are washed carefully to remove any traces of pesticides.
Bananas that have a soft skin are not exported. Specially trained personnel make sure that only high-quality fruit is sent to export markets. We don't want any complaints about overripe bananas. You have to export them when they're still green, that is, not yet ripe.
3,300 crates full of bananas are harvested here per hectare per year and exported to Germany, Japan, Russia and the US. Reconstructing the railway was almost like building a brand new line. The project cost the equivalent of 220 million euros, an enormous sum for a country like Ecuador.
The trains have only recently started running again, and we're still dealing with a few problem areas. It'll take a while before we get that under control. We're always doing maintenance work so that the train can run as efficiently as possible and transport freight and passengers without any disruptions.
We're moving slowly uphill now. The vegetation changes with the elevation. One characteristic of the transition from the coastal region to the Andes Mountains is the cloud forest, a natural primeval paradise that's also one of the world's most endangered ecosystems. We're about to meet a local tribe of indigenous people, the Shuar. They're performing a ceremony to determine whether strangers are welcome here today. If they're not, they'll have to leave. Those who are allowed to visit are greeted with ritual dances. An important Shuar custom is drinking chicha, an alcoholic beverage that's known as spit beer. It was well known even in the times of the Incas. Those who drink chicha are considered friends. Those who don't are enemies. The Shuar didn't treat their enemies kindly.
In one sacred ritual, the tribal princes would cut off the heads of criminals. This took place near a sacred waterfall. They prayed to the god of nature, Ayutam, and used a combination of herbs to shrink the heads.
The people here believe this waterfall is Arutam's temple. This is the final part of the welcoming ceremony. It's a purification ritual designed to remove negative energy from strangers so that they can be brought into the Shuar community. After this uplifting experience, we travel some 90 kilometers to the town of Bucay. It lies in the foothills of the Andes, at an elevation of about 300 meters above sea level. Some local residents in traditional costumes are here to welcome the train. The tourists love it. In 1998, the Chanchan River burst its banks here. The floodwaters tore out a section of the track and damaged a nearby train station and this fuel tank. In 2008, on the 100th anniversary of the railway's completion, President Rafael Correa announced that the entire line would be rebuilt. But most people don't benefit from this new service.
This railway no longer serves a real purpose. It runs every 15 days. Only rich people can afford tickets. The luxury train is not designed for poor people or retired railway workers. They wouldn't be able to afford a ticket anyway.
He's talking about the Tren Crucero. It offers the only continuous service on this route. It runs once every 2 weeks and has room for 54 passengers.
Hola, sean bienvenidos cordialmente a este su tren crucero.
Hello and welcome to the Tren Crucero. As we travel across Ecuador, I invite you to enjoy all the comforts that our train has to offer. During the trip, you'll see impressive landscapes and experience a number of different climates.
The 4-day trip costs the equivalent of €1,000. Only wealthy foreign tourists can afford to travel on this train. This small cemetery near the town of Huigra recalls a dark chapter in the railway's history. Thousands of workers died, either in construction accidents or because they fell ill. The construction supervisor, John Harmon, died here in 1907, probably of yellow fever. This cross is dedicated to him. This cross is for all the workers who died.
Bueno, no podríamos enumerar la cantidad.
There are no precise numbers, but the victims included a number of men from Jamaica, especially in the area around the Devil's Nose. A lot of them worked with dynamite and got caught in the blasts.
Due to the climate, the local people from the highlands were considered unsuitable for railway construction work, so the managers recruited nearly 3,000 men from Jamaica who had experience in building railways. This is the town of Sibambe, where we begin the ascent to the famous Devil's Nose.
En parte es leyenda y en parte tenemos una gran realidad.
The origin of the name is part legend and part reality. The mountain really does look like a nose. But some say that the president at the time, Eloy Alfaro, made a deal with the devil so he could build the railway.
The heart of the world's most challenging railway line lies deep in the gorge of the Chanchan River. The train zigzags its way up the mountain. It moves forwards, then backs up to the next higher section, and then moves forwards again as it makes its ascent.
Recuerden que el río Lucina está con nosotros hasta llegar a la estación.
From here, you can clearly see the Devil's Nose. For the passengers, it's always an impressive trip.
In Sibambe, we told the passengers that we'd be arriving soon at the Devil's Nose. We're going to go all the way up. And the passengers all said, "Oh." So we served some liquor. We wanted to calm the nerves of the passengers. We poured them a drink and said, "Down the hatch."
At one time, people were allowed to sit on the roof of the train, but after several accidents, the authorities put a stop to that. One of the first passengers was President Eloy Alfaro. He wrote, "When we came to Alausi and I looked into that terrifying abyss, I closed my eyes and put my trust in the stars." The town of Alausi is located 2,360 meters above sea level. That's 550 meters higher than Sibambe. Alausi is an important market town for the locals. Tourists come to Alausi to visit the site of Ecuador's largest Inca ruins, which are located nearby, at Ingapirca. These seamless walls, made of carefully chiseled stones, are typical of Inca architecture. The area around Ingapirca was settled by a local people called the Cañari, who were conquered by the Incas in the early 16th century. Archaeologists found a grave under these stones.
There were 11 skeletons. All of the deceased were women. Among them was a possible Cañari priestess, judging by her age and burial garments. The 10 other women were lying in fetal positions around her. That's an indication that they believed that they would be reborn after death.
Ingapirca was sacred to both the Cañaris and the Incas. We return to the Tren Crucero. This train reflects much of Ecuador's modern history.
Each car has its own design. They're all different. The car we're in right now is furnished in Baroque style with colonial highlights. You can see that in the wood paneling and the gold leaf that's attached to it.
We spend the morning crossing a semi-arid region called Tiocaja at an elevation of 3,000 meters.
We also have a car decorated in the pre-colonial style, that is, before the Spanish arrived, where the rituals of our ancestors are evoked, such as ceremonies dedicated to the sun and the moon. This region here was known as the middle of the world.
That refers to the equator, further north of here. This steam engine will take us on the next stage of our journey. It was built by an American company and was used regularly on this line until 1992.
To operate a steam locomotive, you need a lot of experience, ideally as a stoker. If you get the chance to become a train engineer, you should take it. It's a great job. At this point, I'm the only veteran steam engine driver in Ecuador. All the others have retired.
It's time for some last-minute maintenance. While that's going on, we set off for a small chapel right next to the railway line. The chapel was built in 1524, which makes it Ecuador's oldest church. It was heavily damaged by an earthquake in 1797.
The Puruá, the local indigenous people, worshipped the moon and Mother Earth. This chapel is dedicated to the Virgin Mary of Balvanera. It was built on a local ceremonial square that was used by the Indians. After they became Christians, they believed that the Virgin Mary would bless them and their grain harvest.
This was the start of the Spanish effort to convert the region to Christianity. At full steam, the engine cranks out a lot of horsepower and does it at 3,300 meters above sea level. It's almost like watching a volcano erupt.
Someday I'd like to become an engineer and drive a steam engine to the Devil's Nose. That's my dream, and I hope it'll come true one day. Maybe I'll never become an engineer, but at least I'd like to drive a steam locomotive through the mountains.
On this section of the route, the Tren Crucero always uses a steam locomotive. It's a nice change as we travel through the Andean highlands. We reach the town of Riobamba pretty quickly. When the skies are clear, you can see several volcanoes from here. Some of them are still active. The Tren Crucero will stay at Riobamba overnight. Now we're going to sample a local delicacy. We've been invited to the home of our locomotive driver, Edgar. Riobamba is known for a grilled dish made from guinea pigs. It's called cuy asado. Edgar's mother, Maria, keeps a watchful eye on the preparations. Just a few years ago, 2 local people died of plague after eating guinea pig. But Maria knows how to cook the dish properly, with garlic, onions and potatoes. Guinea pig was also popular among the Incas.
When my son gets home from work, he'll eat a whole guinea pig. But you can't always offer people an entire pig, even though they'd like one.
Cuy asado is often served on holidays. It tastes a bit like rabbit. It's not surprising that Edgar often enjoys a big meal. Train drivers can really work up an appetite. The next day, the Tren Crucero leaves Riobamba and makes its way into the mountains. The security guards are still with us. The observation car at the end of the train provides some breathtaking views of the countryside.
Bueno, nos encontramos en la ruta Riobamba-Urbina.
We're now on our way from Riobamba to Urbina. This is one of the country's most impressive railway lines, rising from 2,600 meters to 3,609 meters at Urbina. The station is located at the foot of the Chimborazo volcano, Ecuador's highest mountain, and an important part of our ancient culture.
These llamas seem at home here in Urbina. This is Ecuador's highest railway station. You might expect to see a cogwheel train here, but the engine makes the trip on its own.
Steam locomotives used to run on this line, and if the train was too long, some of the cars were left behind at a station. Then the rest of the train would proceed on up to Urbina, and then go back for the other cars. Afterwards, they'd put them all together again.
A little later, we meet a man who represents another part of Ecuador's cultural heritage. Baltazar Ushka is the Chimborazo region's last hielero, or ice merchant. Even here, at an elevation of 4,100 meters, there's still some grass to be found. Baltazar makes ropes out of the grass so he can tie the ice chunks to his donkey's back. The air is very thin up here, but 70-year-old Baltazar and his donkey are doing just fine. The ice mine is located at an elevation of 4,800 meters. Baltazar has been excavating ice here for 55 years.
When I was 15, I started working with my father, my mother, and siblings. Sometimes people needed so much ice that we had to make 2 trips. We'd put the ice in a truck and then take it to a dealer. The dealer would sell it from house to house so that people could keep their food cold. He also sold ice to the fish sellers at the local market.
Baltazar cuts the ice into chunks that weigh about 50 kilograms each. It's hard work, especially at this altitude. Then he wraps the chunks in grass to keep the ice cold. He ties a rope around a bale of ice and then loads it onto his donkey. Now they'll head back down the mountain. Chimborazo is the highest mountain in Ecuador at almost 6,300 meters. It's now late in the day. Baltazar has returned to Riobamba. He sells his big chunks of ice for the equivalent of just over €4 each. Chimborazo ice is especially pure and dense, but these days only a few customers appreciate those qualities. Connoisseurs say the ice has a sweet taste. Some even claim it's good for the bones. It certainly seems to have kept Balthazar in fine shape for all these years. Our journey on the Tren Crucero continues northward. It's clear the railway was rebuilt for the tourist trade. The locals don't benefit much from it. The train continues to roll through the highlands, and the passengers seem to be enjoying the trip.
I mean, just look out the window. I see things that I've never seen anywhere else. It's fantastic. And the people are very friendly. Only a few of them speak English, and I haven't found anyone who can speak German. But you can write down what you want or use hand gestures, and you'll get along fine.
Ecuador is famed for its roses and exports 2 billion of them every year. The local climate and high elevation offer near-perfect growing conditions. This is the Nevados Roses farm. 52 species of roses are grown here on a total of 35 hectares. Red roses are in demand all year round. 500 workers, most of them women, sort and package the flowers. Even for people who work here every day, roses are something special.
They're the most beautiful gift you can give. A bouquet of roses symbolizes love, affection, and appreciation.
We're now on the last stage of our trip. It's time to say goodbye to our security guards. This is Latacunga. The city has been destroyed several times by earthquakes and damaged by eruptions from the nearby Cotopaxi volcano. After each disaster, the city was rebuilt. The Hacienda La Ciénega has survived intact for more than 400 years. It's hosted a number of prominent guests, including the German geographer and naturalist Alexander von Humboldt.
Humboldt stayed at La Ciénega while he was doing research on Cotopaxi. This was a good place for him to work because on clear days you can see the volcano from here. So Humboldt was able to make detailed visual observations over an extended period of time.
This is the room where Humboldt stayed in 1802. Nowadays, visitors can stay here. Humboldt's work created the basis for his mountain research. But he never did climb Cotopaxi. The national park that surrounds the volcano is home to a number of wild horses. We wanted to find out how they ended up here, in the shadow of the world's tallest active volcano.
En el Parque Nacional Cotopaxi existe lo que es la población de caballos.
The horses that live in the national park broke out of nearby farms and were never rounded up. They've gotten used to the cold weather, the elevation, and the wilderness. And that's why we refer to them as wild horses.
Desde ahí formaron lo que es una población de caballos en el Parque Nacional Cotopaxi.
Cotopaxi is known as the Matterhorn of the Andes. The summit is often obscured by clouds. The final part of our journey takes us through an area that Humboldt called the Avenue of the Volcanoes. The tren crucero is too heavy for the tracks to make this part of the trip, so we've switched to the Tren de los Volcanes, which is lighter. This is also a tourist train, and it makes trips to Quito at the weekend. The Trans-Ecuadorian Railway was once much more than a means of transport. It was a symbol of national pride. But a lot of the freight traffic was moved from the railway to the Pan American Highway. Still, the legacy of the railway remains.
This national symbol was created during the administration of President Eloy Alfaro. He was our country's greatest citizen. The rail project overcame enormous difficulties. In the end, this new transport system helped to move goods and services between the coast and the highlands. And for decades, this system was a symbol of national unity. Unfortunately, it no longer is. Our goal is to restore this national symbol and its cultural heritage.
But can that be done with a railway line that caters mostly to tourists? We arrive in Quito, our final destination. This is the world's highest capital city, at an elevation of 2,850 meters. Quito was one of the 12 original UNESCO World Heritage Sites. The list was first compiled in 1978. Alexander von Humboldt enjoyed his stay in Quito. He wrote that the city simply breathes sensuality and opulence. Nowadays, Quito is considered by many to be the country's party city.
Good morning! It's 10 a.m. and we're at San Roque. We travelled from Quito this morning, and this is the first train that we're travelling on. It's only our train for the day. Good, I'm ready to go. Come and join me. lovely gardens, lots of flowers and trees. Pretty good spot to stop for lunch. Just looks so pretty. It's really classically decorated and there's fresh roses from the rose garden everywhere. What a lovely place to stop for lunch. We've just had a lovely lunch surrounded by roses and now we're heading to check out the chapel and then the rose garden. So I thought that the roses over lunch looked good, and then I've come to the workshop and it's absolutely beautiful. These roses are just incredible in literally every single colour. There's proper multicoloured ones over here. I'm just gonna have a look. Look at these ones. They grow and harvest the roses, and we were told that they send over 21 million roses abroad every year. Apparently in China it's very fashionable right now to have the multicoloured ones that we saw before, but personally, just in case you want to buy me one, I prefer the classic roses. So this is where they pack all of the roses, and it's really interesting to see it from this point of view. You only ever see them when they're in the shops. So they have about 200 people working here. It smells so good.
Hi everybody, Jackie Skelton here, JR World Travel, your travel consultant. Do you think using a travel consultant is expensive? It can be. But guess what? At JR World Travel we do not have a service fee. That means we do not charge you any more to use JR World Travel. Please don't go shopping around, it can be expensive. Call me Jackie at JR World Travel and the number is 844 249 0190.